Hello and welcome back to Slide Into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, aka Schlide, and on the show we talk about stories that are connected within different sports, talk about game outcomes, why they happen, how they happen, and more. And this week there is a boatload of things that we have got to talk about. So first we're going to talk about the AP poll rankings for college basketball, and there is some shaking up this week, obviously because the number one team lost 2 games in a row, so they are no longer the number one team, obviously, but it was pretty huge because they were one of 2 remaining undefeated men's college basketball teams left in the entire country. So yeah, with that being said, Miami, Ohio is currently the last remaining undefeated college basketball team in NCAA basketball. So with that being said, let's get into this top 25. So the new number one team in the country, not unanimously, almost unanimously though, is Michigan. They moved up from the 2 spot to the 1 spot. They got 60 votes for first place, and the number 2 team, Houston, who also moves up 1 spot, got 1 first place vote. So they stole one of Michigan's votes in order to get a unanimous first place vote. Duke, they move up to number 3. Arizona falls 3 spots to number 4. UConn moves up 1 spot, gets the number 5 position. Then we've got Iowa State moving down 1 spot to 6. Purdue, they move up to number 7. They move up 6 spots. So that's pretty big movement there. We've got Kansas moving up 1 spot to number 8. Nebraska at 9, moving down 2 spots. And Illinois at 10, moving down 2 spots to round out the top 10. Then we've got Gonzaga moving up to number 11, moving up 1 spot. Florida moves up to number 12, moving up 2 spots. Texas Tech is at 13. They move up 3 spots after being the second team to dethrone the number 1 overall seed. Virginia is 14th. They move up 1 spot. Michigan State and North Carolina both move down 5 spots. Michigan State at 15, North Carolina at 16. St. John's stays in the same position at 17. St. Louis stays at 18. Vandy stays at 19. Arkansas moves up 1 spot into the 20th to round out the top 20. Louisville moves up 3 spots into 21st. Miami, Ohio moves up 1 spot into 22nd. BYU falls 1 spot into 23rd. And Wisconsin at 24 and Alabama at 25, making an appearance into the AP poll. Both of these teams have been in and out at some point this year. Now they're back in it. So obviously they need to keep winning in order to stay in the top 25. But that being said, there was other teams that also received votes. Got Clemson, Utah State, Tennessee, Villanova, Kentucky, Miami, St. Mary's, California, and VCU. So, yeah, there was a lot of craziness that happened. I mean, we're going into week 15 now. We are very close to March. I mean, it's already February 17th. I mean, it's just time is flying by this season and just really in general. But, yeah, there is just so much parity with college basketball right now just because of how many great teams there are. There are so many good teams. And last year, it was not really like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of good teams, but this year just feels different because it feels like there's a lot of different teams that can win it all. Last year, it only really felt like Duke or Florida or Auburn could really win it all or had the best chance of winning it all. Houston also being that 4th one. I mean, just really the number 1 overall seeds last year were the only ones that really had the best shots at winning it all. This year, there's a lot more teams out there that have a decent shot. And, you know, it doesn't just go to the top 4. I mean, I think really anybody inside the top 10 has a shot at winning the national championship this year. Now, there could be a couple outliers that maybe are in the top 15, top 20, But for them, it really depends on their path and who they come across, and kind of luck, I guess. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting March Madness tournament. I think we're going to see more Cinderella runs. I mean, that might be a bold prediction just because of how last year was, but we've seen years where there's almost all upsets. We've seen a lot of upsets some years. We've seen very few other years like last year. So there's ebbs and flows with March Madness and the tournament. So I'm not too worried about whether or not there's going to be no Cinderella seeds. I remember that was a huge story last year where there was pretty much no Cinderella seeds except for Arkansas, double-digit seed making it to the Sweet 16. So this year, I think, is 100% different. I think there's a lot more teams that have a shot. So, yeah. And it's just going to keep getting shaken up. I mean, it feels like as the season goes on, the games just seem to get tougher. And I kind of like that just because, you start to learn the identity of each team as the season goes along, when they hit roadblocks or whether they find a string of success, they go on a winning streak, they stay undefeated, maybe they lose, then they, they figure out how to win again. Like there's, those compelling aspects of the season that we get to witness as the challenges get more and more difficult, and as we get closer and closer and closer to the NCAA March Madness tournament. So, yeah, really, really big season. I think this is going to be one of the most electric March Madness tournaments this year. All right, with that being said, we're going to pivot a little bit into the Olympics. So the medal count currently, as of today, Norway currently leads the medal count with 30 medals. They have 13 gold medals. Italy is in second with 24 total medals and 9 gold medals. And the United States is in third place with total 20 medals and 6 gold medals. And right now, Norway is on track to lead the Winter Olympics for the third consecutive time. I mean, assuming that they're able to just, keep winning the medals and maintain the lead they currently have in the medal count. But the medal count isn't all the craziness that's been going on in the Olympics, but some of the other teams, like notable teams that are right behind them, Japan, 19 medals, 4 golds, Germany, 17 medals, 4 golds, Austria, 16 medals, 5 golds, and France, 16 medals, 5 golds. So, like, it's pretty close, relatively. I mean, it's very interesting for sure, but a lot of the, part of the reason why I like looking at the medal count is because, obviously in the Olympics there is underdog stories, and there's always some kind of underdog story. I mean, going to the Summer Olympics, you look at 2008 with the 4x100 freestyle relay, where Jason Lezak comes back and gets America the gold, and France being they were not the underdog. They were heavily favored in this relay, and they ended up losing that relay. It was huge. It was a huge deal. And, a year, next Olympics, France ends up winning that relay. And at the time, in that relay, France was actually an underdog as well, because for the relay going in, Australia and the Americans were the favorite that year, but France ended up winning it. So they got their taste of revenge. So those kinds of storylines exist in the Olympics. So paying attention to who won gold the previous year, who's kind of a underdog story, who is how do I put this? Who's favored versus who's unfavored, and the different countries, the way they interact with one another. And one of those stories, and there's a few of them, but one of the ones that happened very recently on Sunday, U.S. men in curling take down the defending gold medalists of Sweden. And again, like I said before, I already kind of talked about why this story is huge because, underdog story, no one really thought this team was going to defeat Sweden. The U.S. in men's curling is actually the youngest team in that tournament. So they were serious underdogs going into this one. And they ended up being able to come out on top. I mean, that's, again, huge deal. So, yeah. And I mean, you could even tell just by looking at some of the responses that they had, like in the press conference. Like you look at Ben Richardson's quote, according to NBC, says, "I'd probably be pinching myself for sure. This is a pretty surreal experience, but I'm very grateful to be here, and we're all really enjoying ourselves." I mean, that's like, you could kind of tell that he's pretty new to the Olympics, and you could tell how much it means and like how big of a deal it is to, I mean, win a gold or, be on track to win a gold medal by defeating the previous champions that had the gold medals, but they're not going to get it anymore. But yeah, I mean, again, youngest men's team in the tournament, 4 players, all under 27 years old. I mean, that's kind of huge. I mean, I remember, I think it was the last Winter Olympics where it was a bunch of like older guys that did it or that competed for curling. But yeah, this year for the U.S., it's kind of the opposite, which is in a way kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, they like getting a win like that takes a lot of confidence, a lot of poise, and again, Richardson with another quote to NBC says, "We know all these teams are really good. We know we can beat any of these teams, and we're here to win. That's been our goal the whole week. Thankfully, we've gotten some wins under our belt now." So, like, it takes a lot to build that confidence, especially, as that younger team that maybe has less experience than the other teams that are in the tournament. And, getting a win, again, over last year's Olympic champions is huge. So, yeah, I mean, we've also seen some downfalls. We saw Quad God in his individual performance. He was favored to be first and ended up getting 8th because he fell twice in his routine. But the reason why he's known as the Quad God is because the level of difficulty of the moves that he performs in the ice rink for figure skating. So, yeah, he does 4 turns a lot of times in the air. I mean, you've probably seen clips of him online. He does backflips. Like, he's done backflips on the ice, which I didn't even think was possible. I didn't really think that was possible at all, but it just seemed like he was defying all laws of physics. But yeah, I mean, it really talented skater. He's 21 years old, but I found his story kind of interesting just because, he, again, heavily favored, underdog from Kazakhstan, gets the win due to Quad God, messing up, falling during the routine. But, when he's talking about dealing with the pressure of losing and, how much more difficult it is when you have that expectation that you're going to win, because that pressure can get to your head. I mean, it gets in your head. Like, you can kind of fill yourself with overconfidence a little bit. You can maybe start to doubt yourself. Like, he talks a lot about the voices that are not necessarily like voices, but the thoughts that he was having going into that final routine that he was skating in. But he is going to be competing in the World Championships next year, and I'm really excited to see how he bounces back from that performance, because if there's one thing that's as good as a underdog story, it's a redemption story. So yeah, really curious to see how that is going to go for him, and I hope it goes well, of course. All right, also for the Olympics, we've also got the men and women's ice hockey. So the women's final match is set. It is the gold medal and bronze medal matches are set. The gold medal match is going to be Canada versus the United States, and the bronze medal match is going to be Sweden versus Switzerland. And the United States for women's hockey has been extremely dominant in the tournament so far. I mean, they played Canada earlier in the tournament in the preliminaries, and they beat them 5-0. So, I mean, this USA team is no joke. Now, Canada has also been dominating other teams as well. So, I think it'll be interesting to watch these two teams play because obviously, really, I mean, this saying always happens in college football, but I mean, it really goes the same for every sport. It's tough to play and beat the same team twice. And I mean, if you've seen Miracle on Ice, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where the USA men's team, they play Russia in the preliminaries, and, they get their butts handed to them. Like, they just get completely destroyed, and then they go through, beat every other team that they play, and then go into the gold medal match playing the same Russian team that just buried them into the dirt, and then they went and they beat them. So Canada could maybe have their own Miracle on Ice story a little bit. I mean, Canada wasn't really an underdog going into this, though. Canada is known for having excellent hockey teams on both the men's and women's side. So it's not really necessarily an underdog story, but in terms of just Canada versus US, I mean, it's a pretty big underdog story. So it'll be a very electric matchup for sure. I mean, the rivalry between Canada and the US was reignited last year in hockey, which is really fun to see. So yeah, I mean, it's just going to keep going, and I hope that rivalry keeps, being shown, because it is Canada-US is always a very entertaining game to watch. So, no, it'll be very fun. And then there's Switzerland-Sweden in the bronze medal match. I mean, that'll be good too, but, both of these matches have countries that are, like, neighboring each other in some capacity. So I think that's also pretty interesting as well. For the men, they're not quite as far along in their tournament. Actually, as we're broadcasting right now, Sweden and Latvia are going to be playing for a spot in the quarterfinal. So, yeah, I mean, there's other teams that have spots. So the U.S. is going to play the winner of that matchup, actually. They're going to play the winner of Sweden and Latvia. And then the other quarterfinal matches have been set up, though. So you've got Slovakia versus Germany. Then you've got Canada versus Czechia. Then you've got Finland versus Switzerland. So, a lot of good games to look forward to, but, we're not going to see the end of the men's tournament. We're not going to be able to see that championship matchup until February 22nd at 7:10 in the morning. So if you want to watch that championship game, you're going to have to wake up relatively early. I mean, not too early. I mean, there's one of the quarterfinal games that's at 5:10 in the morning. So, in comparison, that's so much easier. But yeah, I mean, 2 hours can make a huge difference. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see whether or not USA and Canada is able to get the gold medal match in the men's and women's. I mean, we already have it for the women's, but for the men's, if they were able to do that, that would be pretty cool. I mean, that would be really, really cool. So, yeah, we're going to be following that and keeping an eye out on that. But yeah, with that being said, there is a lot of other stories that we are going to be talking about as well. We've got a couple in college basketball that I think are pretty huge. There's also some big college basketball games that are going to be coming up this week that have implications on spots for March Madness tournament, for conference tournaments, for the whether or not you win the regular season conference, like with your record. So, yeah. With that being said, we're gonna take a little bit of a break, and we're gonna hear a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring, so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. Okay, so there is, like I said before, there's a lot that we've got to talk about. So, I mean, one of the things we got to talk about, obviously, is North Carolina and the Caleb Wilson injury. I think that is huge. There is also a huge fight that erupted in the St. John's versus Providence game where 6 players got ejected. It was absolutely insane. Also going to talk a little bit about load management because there's a couple of teams that have players that are doing load management, and I don't really like load management. And for college sports, I just don't really think you should be trying to do load management. It's just not a good look. But we'll get more into that a little bit later. And again, we're going to talk about some of the big games that are coming up for college basketball. So, all right. That being said, we're going to start off with the St. John's story. So, tempers flared up in the St. John's versus Providence game after Duncan Powell, the forward from Providence, committed a really hard foul against Bryce Hopkins from St. John's, and he basically clotheslined him, but by grabbing his head and pulling him back. And, I mean, he hit the ground pretty hard, and the St. John's bench was not happy about that, and they got up and they tried to go and fight. Coach Rick Pitino, he got up and he tried to keep his players from fighting because, if you fight, you get ejected, and, why show the toughness in the fight when you can show the toughness within the lines of the court? But, a couple of the players ended up slipping by, and then a big fight erupted. So, 6 players from St. John's ended up getting ejected. St. John's was still able to get the victory, though. I mean, at least there's that. So now with that win, St. John's is now 20-5, 13-1 in the Big East, and then Providence is now 11-15, 4-11 in the Big East. And Providence doesn't really have much hope of making it into the tournament. I think a lot of the reason why it just got so rough, at least from Providence's perspective, is because a win against St. John's would have been huge for them, and it would have greatly improved their chances of making it into the March Madness tournament. They could have gone on a run after that, but nope, they ended up not getting it done. If Providence did get that win, they would have been 5-11 in the Big East, and they would have been 12-15 overall. So it would have been a pretty important victory for DePaul, or for Providence, to say the least. But yeah, now I think their March Madness chances are pretty much gone now, if they're not gone already. So, yeah. So North Carolina, we got to talk about for Caleb Wilson, and the reason why we have got to talk about him is because he was their best player. I mean, I don't really know how else to summarize his role on that team, but I mean, he was their best player, and the ball went through him, like the offense ran through him, and now he's out. Now he's not playing. So it's a tough road ahead for North Carolina. I mean, they play NC State here next, actually today at 6. Then they play Syracuse, which, I mean, that could end up being a tough game. It's on the road. Then they play number 21 Louisville, then Virginia Tech, then Clemson, who's one of the top teams in the ACC right now, and then they play Duke at the end of the year. So I mean, it's not an easy schedule for North Carolina, and these are all losable games now that Caleb Wilson is not going to be, on the court for them. So really nervous for this North Carolina team, but sometimes people rally around the team when there's injuries like that. Someone steps up. I mean, it's North Carolina. They're bound to have another talented guy, but it's just a matter of who is going to be the one to step up and fill in for Caleb Wilson and just really own his role as quickly as possible. Because, I mean, you look at North Carolina's remaining schedule, there's 6 games left. There is 6 games left remaining on their schedule, or 5, depending on when you're listening, because they play on Saturday, or they also play on Saturday this week. So but anyways, it's a very tough road for North Carolina, and they're currently ranked 16th, but they could fall out of the rankings just as quickly. And NC State isn't really doing too hot either. I mean, they had a crushing loss to Louisville, and I mean, I am really trying to emphasize the crushing part of what I'm talking about, because they lost 118 to 77. Now, that's like, it's 41 points. That's a 41-point loss to an in-conference opponent that was ranked lower than you in your own conference. And then they followed up with a home loss to Miami. And Miami is one of those teams where I think they could maybe make a run if they make it into the tournament. They're pretty underrated, and I don't really think a lot of people are looking at them right now. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there's a decent amount of ACC teams that could make a sneaky run, kind of like what happened in the Pac-12 in, I think it was 2022, where they had, I believe it was 3 teams in the Elite 8. Like 3 out of the 8 teams in the Elite 8 were Pac-12 teams. It was crazy. But yeah, I think we could maybe see something like that with the ACC this year. But again, it really depends on the paths of the teams. So yeah, a lot of hope is needed for this North Carolina team. A lot of resilience is going to be at play, but ultimately, I think North Carolina could at least win 2 of those games. I think they could win 2, but don't be surprised if North Carolina ends up not winning any of their remaining games. And don't be surprised either if North Carolina is one of those teams where they're a last 4 in, where they have to do a play-in game to, technically make the tournament. So, yeah, I mean, really tough spot for North Carolina, especially after the year they've had. I mean, it's been a pretty solid year for them so far, but I'm projecting that they will probably be outside of the top 25 within 3 weeks. I'm going to give it like 2 weeks for them to exit the top 25. Because, I mean, they already fell 6 spots. It was 6 spots that they fell. So, yeah, little bit nervous for this North Carolina team. But, they'll figure it out, hopefully, for their sake. But, yeah. All right, transitioning, still on college basketball, but Kansas State fires Jerome Tang out of Kansas State, and they said the firing was for cause. Now, Currently, Kansas State is last place in the Big 12, and they have one win in the Big 12. He lashed out at his players after a blowout loss to Cincinnati last Wednesday, and according to ESPN, the basis for the for-cause firing, at least to ESPN source, is the language in Tang's contracts that references any activity that brings public disrepute, embarrassment, or ridicule to Kansas State. And they're saying essentially what they're saying is that the way he was talking about the players and the outcome of the game showed Kansas State in an embarrassing light, at least an embarrassing enough light for them to want to fire him. So, yeah, not entirely surprised. I mean, I think he kind of got away with hanging around a couple of years because he did take Kansas State to the Sweet 16 during the early part of his career there, but ever since then, it's been a slow and gradual decline. And, he was given chance after chance to, bring it back and run it back to the Sweet 16, but it just never happened. And I think Kansas State, they waited long enough to fire him for cause, so that way they didn't have to pay the buyout. So I guess smart move by Kansas State, but not really sure what Tang is going to do and where he's going to go by the season's end. Whether he goes to the NBA or stays in college or stays in the Big 12 or whatever. I have no idea what he's going to do. And maybe, depending on, what happens, we might be talking about that later. But, yeah, just not good for Kansas State. It is a good thing, however, for Kansas, because the last time Kansas State fired their head coach, Kansas won the national championship. So there is one thing that does tend to happen in March Madness, and that is history tends to repeat itself. I don't know why, but that's just how it is sometimes. There's a lot of times where history just happens to repeat itself. Certain amount of 7 seeds win, a certain amount of 2 seeds win. Every once in a while, there's some weird, crazy, historic stat that talks about some weird outcome back whenever the last time the two teams played, which could have been 20 years before, and it somehow still has some effect on the outcome of the game. And unironically, it will just repeat. The outcome of the previous game will repeat itself just because, the two teams know about that history and they have a history with one another. So it will be interesting to see if Kansas is able to repeat that little part of history and get a national championship. So, yeah, I mean, good for Kansas, I guess. You could also look at it from the perspective of, Jerome Tang is a terrible coach, and it's so easy to beat him now. So why would we want him fired? You don't want bad coaches to get fired when they're in your conference because then it makes it easier to win. But it's just, it's interesting. It's just not something I was really expecting at this point in the season. I was thinking he should have been fired probably after last year, but I understand the decision of waiting, and, Kansas State ended up making the right decision to wait because now they don't have to spend a pretty penny to let him go. So, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of the games coming up. There is a absolutely crazy slate of games coming up just today, actually. So we've got Michigan-Purdue. There's also Villanova going to Xavier. North Carolina, NC State. That's going to be big. Louisville, SMU also is going to be a pretty big one. I think UCLA, Michigan State could maybe be a big one. Michigan State kind of spiraling a little bit. UCLA could maybe take advantage, but we know Mick Cronin and how he doesn't like to travel, so maybe not. Maybe this is where Michigan State turns it around. Then there's Wisconsin, Ohio State. Wisconsin is heating up. Ohio State is desperate for a big quad one win. Wisconsin, traveling to Columbus is a great opportunity for the Buckeyes to get that. You've also got Nebraska, Iowa. That's, a rivalry game right there. And yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big slate for today for basketball games. I mean, it's a lot of important games. I mean, you look at Xavier Villanova. If Xavier beats Villanova, that puts them in a much better position in the Big East tournament and increasing their chances of making the March Madness tournament. Xavier is kind of one of those bubble teams. They're just outside of the bubble right now, but a win against Villanova, who's currently third in the Big East, would boost Xavier up immensely at this point of the season. Michigan versus Purdue. I mean, Purdue has the chance to dethrone the new number one team in the country at their home. So this atmosphere for Purdue tonight could be very electric. No, not could. It will be very electric. But Purdue has lost 2 of the 4 games that they've lost at home. Like 2 of their losses are at home, 2 of their losses are on the road. Now, again, this is the number one team in the country. And Iowa State was up in that same sphere when they played Purdue earlier this year. Now, I do think this Purdue team is different, obviously, at this point of the year. I think they've turned it around a little bit. I mean, ever since that 3-game losing streak that Purdue had when they lost to UCLA, Illinois, and Indiana, just all bing, bang, boom right in a row. But then they go on a winning streak. They're back to their winning ways. They beat Maryland 93-63. Then they beat Oregon 68-64. Then they go on the road to Nebraska and win 80-77. And then they go on the road to Iowa and beat them 78-57. So, I mean, this Purdue team is rolling right now. So they could maybe sneak an upset win over this Michigan team. And I think the outcome of this game is really going to show us as viewers of the game and spectators of college basketball what the levels are. Like how much of a divide there is between the levels of each of the teams. Now, Michigan has the opportunity to truly separate themselves by getting a win over Purdue, who's in the top 10. I mean, that'd be another top 10 win for Michigan. I mean, you look at the way Michigan has dominated before this season. They dominated Auburn, who was ranked 21 at the time, 102-72. They killed Gonzaga, who was number 12 at the time, 101-61. Then you go down, USC, they win by 30, 96-66. USC was ranked 24th at the time. Then they play number 5 Nebraska, who was undefeated when they played Michigan, and they won 75-72. Then they go on the road to Michigan State, who was number 7 at the time. They win 83-71. And now they play Purdue. This is their next ranked game. They haven't played a ranked opponent since Michigan State. So this is going to be a very interesting game to watch. And I think, especially with Duke coming up on Michigan's schedule, 4 days later, they play number 3 Duke on the 21st of February. So that is going to be a crazy game as well. And maybe Purdue catches Michigan lacking and looking ahead to Duke. But we'll see. I mean, we will see. Okay, so moving on now to Wednesday. There's a couple of games here I mean, it's not as crazy as today's slate of games, that's for sure. But there is still some pretty big ones here. We've got BYU versus Arizona. BYU has been spiraling, and they haven't really gotten a good win. Arizona on a 2-game losing streak, and they're also down Koa Pete with a lower leg injury. So it's going to be very interesting for BYU. This is a great opportunity for them to get that quality win that everyone has been asking them to get. And it would be a true quality win as well, because it would be on the road for the Cougars. Arizona, this is a chance for them to bounce back and get back to their winning ways, reinstill confidence in the team, and, find a way to play down. I mean, playing down is not an ideal situation, but it happens sometimes, and you can't let that get to you. Now, Arizona has a really young team, so I'm not too surprised about the outcome of the Texas Tech game. I mean, obviously, me and Arizona family wanted Arizona to win, but with Koa out and with them experiencing their first loss on the season to Kansas and then having to just sit on it for as long as they had to, I had a feeling that maybe the mojo wasn't really going to be there. And it was kind of there. There was flashes, but they just weren't able to capitalize on the rebound. So I think, again, Arizona has a chance to turn it around here. BYU has the chance to really turn it around here. So Arizona is going to be going up against a very desperate BYU team. Then we've got Kansas, Oklahoma State, and this one's really on my radar just because of the way Kansas lost to Iowa State and Oklahoma State getting that win over BYU. I mean, that was huge. That was just absolutely huge. And I could see this one possibly being a trap game just because of some of the games Kansas has coming up on their schedule. They do play Houston later this week, so that could be something to keep in mind going into this game. Maybe Kansas is looking ahead to Houston and overlooking Oklahoma State, to which that would be Oklahoma State's opportunity to strike at home. So, yeah, that'll be a fun one to watch as well. And I think Illinois USC will be a pretty interesting one. Illinois traveling to USC. It's a late night game. It's at 9 p.m. So very late for Illinois. So I think maybe USC could use that to their advantage. But Illinois, they've shown that they are a quality team, and it just seems like they look better and better and better each time they play. I mean, besides, what am I thinking of? I think it was Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was Wisconsin, and I guess Michigan State, where they kind of slipped up a little bit. But, they turned it around after getting the win over Indiana, and Indiana just was not able to do anything to this Illinois team that game. So this could be the start of a big run for this Illinois team. All right, so for Thursday's games, we've got, there's not really a lot of games. A lot of, smaller schools are playing, teams that you'd maybe see in a Cinderella run, more, I guess, FCS level schools, at least in comparison to college football. They would be FCS in college football. So, Samford, the Citadel, Northeastern, UNC Wilmington, Chicago State, High Point. Those are teams that you would typically see there. Vermont is one that they make the tournament relatively frequently, but they've never won a game in the tournament. So that could be something. Vermont plays UMBC, and UMBC is the team that was the first ever 16 seed to win a college basketball game. So maybe UMBC goes on that run again. Who knows? I mean, it was a one-game run. But still, it was a pretty crazy run because nobody was expecting it at the time. Because it was not even a thought, a conception of thought of a 16 team beating a number 1 seed. So, yeah, that was just absolutely huge. And then Friday, there's Indiana versus Purdue. That one's always a great game. It's going to be at Mackey Arena. I obviously hope IU wins. I think if IU gets it together, and they always, I don't know why, we just always do get it together for the Purdue game, but it is at Mackey, and like I said before, this Purdue team is kind of heating up, but they are going up against the number 1 team in the country. A couple days before, maybe the Purdue team will be a little bit worn out when they play IU, but we'll see. I mean, I think it'll be a very close game, like it almost always is. It's almost always a close game because both schools are pretty good in their history with basketball. Neither of them really have a losing culture. Purdue is kind of like the Oregon of college basketball, like in comparison to college football, where they're pretty good consistently, but they've never won a national championship. Like, that's Oregon with college football. Like, they're pretty good consistently going to bowl games, consistently having winning seasons, making the playoffs a lot, and also recruiting high-level talent all the time, but they've never won a national championship. So I'm not trying to be like, haha, Purdue, you didn't win a national championship in basketball yet. But I'm just making the comparison because, Oregon is seen as a powerhouse in college football, and they don't have a national championship. So if Oregon is a powerhouse in college football with no rings, then why can't Purdue be considered a powerhouse since they don't have any rings and they've had decent success recently? So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Okay, so Saturday, we've got Miami versus Virginia. I think that one is going to be the sneaky game. Miami traveling to Virginia. Now, Miami has quietly had a very solid year. They're 20-5. They're 9-3 in the ACC. Currently 4th in the ACC standings. They lost to Florida 82-68. BYU 72-62. I mean, that's BYU's best win right there. They lost to Clemson 69-59, Florida State 65-63. That was a bit of a shock. Then they lost to Cal 86-85. That one was also a bit of a shock just because Cal hasn't really been that great this year. But they're on a roll right now. They did beat North Carolina 75-66, a 9-point win. They also beat NC State 77-76, their most recent game that they played. So, yeah, I mean, Miami doesn't really have too terrible of a schedule ahead of them. They play Virginia Tech. Then they play ranked Virginia, which that'll be a tough game. They play Florida State again, and I think that one will also be a pretty tough game just because of how close it was last time. Then you've got Boston College, then SMU, and I think SMU at SMU is going to be a little bit scary. Then you've got Louisville to close out your schedule, 21st ranked Louisville to close out the schedule. So not an easy schedule for the Hurricanes by any means, but they're very interesting. I mean, they could be very sneaky. I mean, a couple of years ago, their head coach randomly retired in the middle of the basketball season just because he was so tired of dealing with NIL and the recruits. He was just done. He was over it. So he retired, and Miami was pretty successful with him when he was coach. But I mean, now it seems like Miami's kind of going back to that and starting to get back to a more maintained success, if you will. Okay, so still on Saturday, and we're going to go into Sunday and Monday as well. But for Saturday, we've got Arizona versus Houston, number 2 versus number 4. Big matchup. Now, obviously, it's kind of hard to really talk about the storylines for this one just because, it could change very dramatically because of how insane the Big 12 has been this year. And these two teams are the number 1 and number 2 teams in the Big 12 right now. So it's a big game. It's a big game. So obviously, if Arizona beats BYU, that could be the start of, an onslaught, resuming the onslaught of teams. Traveling to Houston is going to be pretty tough, though. Houston, they have some pretty good momentum going themselves right now. So this would be Arizona's opportunity to get back into that first place position in the Big 12 and, get the Big 12 conference regular season locked up. So big game for both these teams. It's a battle for first place for the Big 12 in the regular season. So it'll be electric, as most of the Saturday slate games are. All right, now we're going to move on to Sunday. Ohio State, Michigan State, I think could be an interesting one just because, again, like I said before, Ohio State is kind of desperate for a quad 1 win, and Michigan State spiraling a little bit. This could be Ohio State's opportunity to walk into Michigan State's house and take their cookies. So I don't think it's very likely, but the opportunity is there for them, assuming that Ohio State loses their previous game. So yeah, big game for the Buckeyes. I mean, that's the biggest game on the schedule for Sunday. And then Monday, and I swear, I don't know what it is with the Monday slates. Like, there's not a lot of games on Monday, but the games on Monday just go absolutely crazy. I mean, you've got Louisville, North Carolina. They're within 5 spots of each other on the AP poll. North Carolina, obviously, with the Caleb Wilson injury, like, that hurts them a lot. So I don't think that game's going to be as good. But, a week and a half ago, when Caleb Wilson was playing, after they beat Duke, that would have been an electric game to watch. But now I'm not really so sure. And that could change. I mean, my, unsuredness might change after North Carolina, plays well in their games leading up to this Louisville game. But really kind of depends on that. Louisville has started to really heat up and really become dominant again. So really intrigued to see what Louisville does. I mean, I don't know if they're going to go like crazy like they did with North Carolina State. And maybe that would be really funny because then we could say that Louisville has some kind of gripe with teams from North Carolina, like within the state of North Carolina, which I think would be funny. But Duke is also in the state of North Carolina, and Louisville was not able to beat them, so that is besides the point. But another game on Monday that is going to be electric is Houston versus Kansas. Houston traveling to Allen Fieldhouse for this one. And, we already talked a little bit about how Houston was playing Arizona. But the turnaround between the two games is 2 days. It's 2.5 days because they play Arizona at 2 and they play Kansas at 8. So really it's about 2.5 days, a little less than 2.5 days. But yeah, I mean, Kansas, they don't really have an easy schedule leading up to this game either. I mean, for Kansas, you look at, they play Oklahoma State, then Cincinnati, then Houston, just all in a row, just like that. With 3 games in between Oklahoma State and Cincinnati, and 2 days between Cincinnati and Houston. So, pretty tough slate for both of these games, for both these teams. And, it's really going to really show us how battle-tested both of them are going to be, whether they're going to be able to maintain success after playing incredibly tough opponents like that. So, yeah, I don't really know who's going to win. I mean, to me, it really depends on who Kansas has on the floor. When Kansas played Arizona, they didn't have their star, who is Darian Peterson, if you don't know. But they didn't have him on the floor when they played Arizona, and they played really well. They distributed the ball well. And when they played against Iowa State, when Darian Peterson was there, the team lost by 20 points, and they just didn't play well. And so, to me, like, when I was watching them, like, they were distributing the ball really well when they were playing against Arizona without Darian Peterson. And if you didn't know why Darian Peterson wasn't playing in that game to begin with, it was because he had flu-like symptoms. And yes, I said that right. Flu-like symptoms. Not that he had the flu, but he had flu-like symptoms. So, yeah, that's essentially what I'm saying, is that he opted out. And that's what we're going to be talking about next, is opt-out. So, Peterson is one of the players who has been finding ways to opt out. And the other opt-out for college basketball that's been noticeable is, I believe it's Aaron Roderick, if I'm not mistaken. But he's also one of their star players, and yeah, like he's one of their better players that's on the roster. And so he's played, I believe, 13 out of the 23 or 24 games that BYU has had this season. Really bad. I mean, you're talking about opting out. People talk about the NBA and the opt-outs, but oh my word, like this is just terrible. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I really don't like opt-outs. I don't like it when people opt out, because you look scared when you do that. And maybe BYU would be having a better conference record, would have a better overall record. Maybe they would have beaten Arizona earlier this year if, he had been playing more basketball and had more reps before going into that game. But no. So, yeah, I mean, part of the reason why I don't like opt-outs in college basketball is because you get better as the season goes along. You don't just stay constant like that. You're either getting consistently better or getting consistently worse. There's not really an in-between. And just like with anything, the more you do something, the more you practice something, the better you're going to get. Whether it's a little thing like, maybe fixing your technique on a shot, or, getting faster in practice, or, being able to, or just being more physical on the floor, on defense, or just really fundamentals. Fundamentals gradually get better the more you play a sport, especially in an, real in-game situation and not just at practice. So I think that has been hurting BYU a lot, and maybe we'd be looking at the rankings completely differently if he was here the whole time. If he was here the whole time, maybe we'd be looking at the AP poll differently. Maybe BYU would be a top 10 team. Maybe Arizona wouldn't be a top 10 team. Maybe they would be in the 20th position for all we know. So, again, it's hypothetical land. I mean, that's kind of how it goes with sports sometimes, but, opting out, bad. That's pretty much the whole point of that speech right there. But, yeah, with that being said, that's all we got time for today. If you want to stay tuned and keep up with future episodes, or if you want to go back and re-listen, you can always go to Patreon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube, and the broadcast gets uploaded there. You can also go to TikTok, Instagram, Facebook to see more short form content like game predictions and genuine reactions to other stories. And yeah, with that being said, I'll see you all on the next one. Slide out.